Jake had always been an ordinary man, born in a small town with a simple job and a quiet life. He lived like countless others on Earth. He wasn't rich, famous, or even someone people would remember. He was just Jake. But his story, one that no one had expected to be important, was about to change everything. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air is cool and the leaves rustle on the sidewalks. Jake had just finished his shift at the local hardware store and was walking home. He looked up at the night sky, a habit he had since childhood. He often wondered what lay beyond the stars, what kind of world existed out there. But tonight, as he walked, there was something different in the air. The sky seemed to shimmer for a brief moment, as though the stars themselves were alive, blinking in an unusual rhythm. Jake didn't notice the moment his life began to unravel. It was so quiet, almost imperceptible, but something inside him stirred. A sudden jolt of pain shot through his chest, making him gasp. His legs buckled beneath him, and he collapsed to the ground with a sharp thud. His heart raced as he struggled for air, but everything around him blurred, his vision fading to black. For a few moments, there was only darkness. Then there was nothing. No heartbeat, no breath, no life. Jake had died. Back in the heart of the galaxy, the Xeric Empire had just received strange news. A report that a human, someone from Earth, had died under mysterious circumstances. This was no ordinary death. To the Xerics, who had watched over humanity for centuries, this human's passing seemed different. The universe itself had shuddered. Something had shifted, and no one, not even the most experienced Xeric generals, could explain it. The Xerics had always viewed humans as primitive. Their technology was nothing compared to the empires that had dominated the stars. Earth, a planet far from the center of galactic civilization, was often overlooked, a backwater place where nothing truly significant happened. But the death of this one human had made the universe tremble. The death was not ordinary, and the Xerics were keen to understand why. Back on Earth, Jake's body lay motionless, his lifeless eyes staring up at the night sky. The world continued on around him, unaware of the events that were unfolding. No one knew why Jake had died. No one could explain the strange energy that seemed to have surged through his body at the moment of his death. The doctors who examined him after his sudden collapse found no cause, no reason for the pain he had felt, and no answer to his untimely end. It was as if his death was a hole in the fabric of reality itself. But as Jake's death was marked by grief on Earth, the universe was not indifferent. Deep in space, the Xeric fleet prepared for a mission unlike any other. Something powerful had been awakened, and the Xerics intended to investigate. The galaxy, vast and ancient, had many secrets, and they were determined to uncover them. The death of this human was the key to something bigger. It had to be. The Xerics, with their vast fleets and advanced technology, were experts in conquering planets. They had crushed civilizations before. The human race was not a threat, at least, not on the surface. But the Xerics had heard stories, rumors whispered in ancient texts, about a power that could awaken when the time was right. And now that power had been triggered, all because one human had died. Back on Earth, Jake's family and friends mourned in silence. His parents were heartbroken, unable to understand why their son had been taken from them. His best friend, Sarah, stood by his grave, wondering what had happened. She couldn't shake the feeling that something about Jake's death wasn't natural. He had been healthy. He had been strong. But something in the world seemed wrong now. The air felt heavy, and she noticed strange patterns in the sky, almost like the stars themselves were watching. She shook the thought from her mind. She was just grieving, she told herself. It wasn't the stars. It couldn't be. But deep in her heart, Sarah felt it. The world had changed. And she didn't know it yet, but the universe was beginning to shift because of Jake. His death, though tragic, had triggered an event far beyond anything humanity could understand. As the days passed, strange things began happening around the globe. The skies above major cities began to flicker with odd lights. Seismic activity spiked in places where earthquakes were unheard of. And in space, an ancient force began to stir. The Xeric Empire had no idea what they were about to face. They had already launched their fleet, sending warships to Earth to investigate the mysterious death. But they had no idea that their arrogance would be their downfall. Earth, a planet they considered insignificant, was about to reveal its greatest secret. Jake's death was not just the end of one man's life. It was the beginning of something far greater. A chain reaction that would shake the entire galaxy to its core. The Xerics arrived at Earth. Their fleet, vast and imposing, entered the atmosphere with incredible speed, their ships creating shockwaves as they approached the planet. The technology aboard their warships was far beyond anything Earth had seen. They believed that conquering Earth would be easy. After all, the humans were nothing compared to the might of the Xeric Empire. They had destroyed countless worlds, brought entire civilizations to their knees, and Earth was just another planet in the galaxy. But as they neared Earth's atmosphere, something unexpected happened. Their ships began to shake violently, their systems flickering as if they were being pulled by an unseen force. The Xeric fleet, normally impervious to anything, began to lose control. General Vorak, the leader of the Xeric fleet, stood at the command center, his face twisting in confusion. "What is happening?" he demanded. His officers scrambled at their consoles, trying to understand what was going wrong. The systems they had relied on for centuries were failing. Their weapons systems, their shields, and even their communication were being disrupted. "Something on the planet is interfering with our technology," one of the officers reported, his voice filled with panic. "It's not just a disturbance. It's like the planet itself is fighting back." Vorak stared at the view screens, watching as Earth grew larger in the distance. Something was wrong. This was no ordinary planet. The death of that human had set something in motion. He could feel it. A dark, powerful energy rising from the surface of the planet. The Xeric fleet was close to Earth, but they weren't ready for the force they were about to encounter. They weren't prepared for the universe itself to respond to a single human's death. Back on Earth, Sarah sat in her apartment, staring out the window at the same sky that had once felt so calm and familiar. The strange events around her grew more intense by the hour. She watched the news reports of strange occurrences in cities around the world, of military activity and unusual seismic readings. Something was happening, but no one could explain it. She couldn't shake the feeling that Jake's death had something to do with it. That somehow it wasn't just an accident or a medical mystery. It was as though the universe was reacting to his passing. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. For a moment, there was silence. The strange lights in the sky vanished, and the air grew still. The planet seemed to hold its breath. The Xeric fleet had arrived. And the galaxy would never be the same. Jake's death had ignited something far beyond his understanding. The universe had been shaken. Earth was no longer just another small, insignificant planet in the cosmos. The death of one human had unleashed a force so powerful that even the most advanced empire in the galaxy had been thrown into chaos. And as the Xeric fleet prepared to make their move, they would soon realize just how wrong they had been about Earth and how dangerous the humans could be. Jake's death had not been the end of a life. It had been the beginning of a war that would shake the very foundation of the universe. As the Xeric fleet entered Earth's atmosphere, their massive ships filled the sky, their engines roaring with power. To anyone watching from the ground, it was a terrifying sight. Sleek, dark warships that looked like something straight out of a nightmare. These were no ordinary invaders. The Xerics were the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. Their ships faster than light, their weapons capable of obliterating entire cities in a single strike. But they had no idea what they were about to face. General Vorak stood at the command center of the flagship, his piercing eyes scanning the vast space ahead. He was a seasoned warrior, a leader who had conquered dozens of planets. He had seen countless civilizations fall beneath the might of the Xeric Empire. Earth, with its primitive technology and insignificant position in the galaxy, seemed like an easy target, but something about this mission felt different. As the fleet descended through the atmosphere, a strange energy field seemed to pulse through the air. It wasn't just a disturbance. It was as if Earth itself was fighting back. "Prepare for deployment," Vorik ordered, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease in his chest. His fleet moved into position, ready to carry out their mission of conquest. But as they closed in on Earth's surface, their systems began to glitch. At first, it was a small thing. One of the targeting computers malfunctioned, then another. But soon, the problems became far more serious. The ship's advanced weapon systems flickered and sputtered, losing power. The gravity shields that protected their vessels began to malfunction, making their ships feel as though they were being pulled in different directions. Vorik's face darkened as he watched his fleet struggle. Something was wrong. "Report," he barked. "We can't get a lock on Earth's surface, sir," one of his officers replied, panic in his voice. "The sensors are completely scrambled. It's as if the planet itself is interfering with our systems." Vorik's brows furrowed. He had heard rumors about this, stories passed down from ancient Xeric texts that spoke of a hidden power deep within the galaxy, a force that could disrupt even the most advanced technology. But he had always dismissed these tales as nothing more than myth. Now, however, he was beginning to believe them. "There must be something on the planet's surface causing this," Vorik muttered, though his gut told him that what they were facing wasn't just technology. It was something more ancient, something far more dangerous. He turned his attention back to the view screen, watching as Earth grew larger and larger in the distance. The planet looked so small, so insignificant against the backdrop of space, yet it was somehow more than that. This was no longer just a simple mission. It was becoming a challenge, one that the Xeric Empire wasn't prepared for. Back on Earth, the people of the planet were blissfully unaware of the danger closing in on them. The skies had darkened with the arrival of the Xeric fleet, but the city streets remained bustling, unaware of the alien threat that hovered above them. People were caught up in their daily lives, unaware that the universe had begun to stir in ways they couldn't possibly understand. Meanwhile, Sarah, Jake's best friend, sat in her apartment, staring out the window at the strange lights now flickering in the sky. She had always felt something was different about Jake, but she could never have imagined how deeply his death would change the world. Every part of her being told her that Jake's death wasn't just a tragic accident. It was the trigger for something far greater. The strange energy, the power that seemed to pulse from the Earth, was linked to him. But how? Why? As Sarah watched the lights dance across the sky, she had no way of knowing that the Xeric fleet's systems were beginning to malfunction. She had no idea that the Earth was about to reveal a power no one had anticipated. The planet's mysteries were not limited to the things humans could understand. Jake's death had set something into motion, a force that was now awakening, responding to the presence of the Xeric invaders. General Vorik's frustration grew as his fleet continued to be pulled apart by forces beyond his control. One by one, his warships were losing power. Their weapon systems had gone offline. Even their communication channels were down. The fleet, once a symbol of invincibility, was falling apart. "We are losing control," one of the officers shouted, his voice full of panic. "The ships, they're being pulled into orbit. We can't stop it." Vorik clenched his fists. He had faced enemies before, but this was something new, something he couldn't fight with weapons. This wasn't just a battle of might. It was a battle of will, of power that he didn't understand. He had never believed in the ancient stories, but now, standing on the threshold of this unknown force, he was beginning to feel the truth in them. "Prepare to land," Vorik commanded, his voice tight with uncertainty. "We must make contact with Earth. We cannot be defeated by something so primitive." As his fleet slowly descended to the surface, the strange force surrounding them grew stronger. Earth's energy, whatever it was now undeniably affecting them. And for the first time, General Vorak, a creature used to complete control, felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. On the ground below, a different kind of power was taking shape. Jake, the man who had died in the streets, was not truly gone. His death had awakened something deep inside the Earth, a force tied to the very core of the planet, a power older than the galaxy itself. The universe, which had remained indifferent to Earth for centuries, was now taking notice, and the Xereks were about to feel the full weight of that power. As the fleet continued to struggle against Earth's overwhelming energy, the people of Earth remained unaware of the cosmic battle unfolding above their heads. What they didn't know was that the death of a single human, Jake, had begun a chain reaction that would change the course of history forever. The Xereks, with all their technology and power, were facing something they couldn't comprehend, a force that wasn't of machines or weapons, but of something far deeper. The galaxy, it seemed, had just learned that the true power of Earth lay not in technology or armies, but in the very essence of humanity itself. The battle for Earth had begun, and it was not just one of physical might. It was a battle of ancient powers, of cosmic energy, and of a world that was far more connected to the universe than anyone had ever imagined. As the Xerek fleet continued to descend into Earth's atmosphere, their ships shook violently. The strange energy that had begun to ripple through their systems was now growing stronger, and the once pristine technology that had been so reliable in conquering other worlds was failing them. The Xerek warships, designed for domination, were being torn apart by a force they could neither see nor understand. General Vorak gritted his teeth, staring out at the chaotic scene unfolding on the command deck. His fleet was beginning to fall into disarray. Ships that had once been the pride of the Xerek Empire now struggled to maintain control. The gravitational fields around them fluctuated wildly, and their communication systems were scrambling every attempt to reach other ships in the fleet. The data streams that once allowed them to analyze entire planets were now nothing more than static and confusion. "We can't maintain formation," an officer shouted, barely holding onto his console as the ship bucked again. "We're being pulled in different directions." Vorak's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to losing control, but now, for the first time, he felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. The stories from ancient texts that spoke of powerful forces hidden across the universe were no longer just tales. They were real. And Earth, a planet that had always seemed so insignificant to the Xereks, was now revealing that its true strength had nothing to do with its weapons or technology. It lay in something far deeper, something far older. "We're being sucked toward the planet's surface," another officer added, his voice trembling. "Our trajectory is unstable. It's as if the planet itself is calling us." Vorak clenched his fists. The Xereks were an empire built on fear and domination, but they were no match for what they were facing now. They had expected Earth to be an easy target, a planet they could easily conquer. But they were wrong. Whatever this force was, it wasn't something they could fight with weapons. It was as if the entire planet was alive, aware of their presence, and determined to push them away. Above Earth, the fleet continued its downward spiral, growing ever closer to the planet's surface, and yet unable to stop its descent. The once powerful ships of the Xerek fleet now felt like nothing more than toys in the hands of an ancient power. It was a force that transcended everything they knew, and it was beginning to show its true power. Back on Earth, people were noticing the strange changes in the sky. It wasn't just the unusual lights that had appeared the night of Jake's death. Now, the very air itself seemed different, thick with energy. It was as if the planet was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The ground trembled slightly at times, and strange electrical storms began to form in the atmosphere, with bolts of lightning arcing through the clouds in patterns no one had ever seen before. People looked up in awe and fear, unsure of what was going on, but unable to look away. Sarah, still mourning the loss of her best friend Jake, couldn't shake the feeling that his death was the key to what was happening. It was as if his passing had unlocked something that was always meant to remain hidden. She remembered the strange dreams she had been having ever since Jake's death. Dreams of vast, ancient beings, of planets shifting in the sky, and of Earth itself as a living, breathing entity. She had thought it was just her grief playing tricks on her, but now, standing at the window, she knew it wasn't just her imagination. Something was happening. Something big. She turned from the window, grabbing her jacket and heading out the door. If there was something to be learned from all of this, she knew she had to find out. Jake's death had started something connected to these strange events. She felt as though she was the only one who could make sense of it, even if she didn't fully understand what was happening. As she stepped outside, the air felt thick with energy. The ground beneath her feet vibrated gently, like a pulse. And then she looked up. The sky had darkened, and the first of the Zerek warships appeared, descending toward the Earth. It was massive, its shadow spreading over the city as it moved silently through the air. Sarah froze, staring up in disbelief. This was no ordinary aircraft. It was something far beyond anything she had ever seen. And it was coming for them. The general motioned for his team to keep pushing forward. As they marched through the desolate landscape, the air grew heavier, more oppressive. They passed over vast plains, their boots crunching on the dry, cracked earth. The air smelled faintly of sulfur, and the only sounds that broke the silence were the echoes of their footsteps and the occasional crack of distant thunder. Then, as if the planet had been waiting for them, the ground erupted in front of them. The first blast came without warning, a deafening roar that shook the entire landscape. The soldiers scrambled, their weapons aimed at the sudden explosion of light and energy that tore up the earth. A massive shockwave rippled outward, throwing several soldiers off their feet. Dust and debris clouded the air as the blast reverberated, leaving the Zereks momentarily disoriented. "What is this?" One of the soldiers screamed, his voice full of terror as he struggled to regain his footing. Vorek's heart raced as he raised his hand, signaling for his forces to regroup. But it was already too late. From the ground, strange tendrils of light and energy shot upward, crackling with raw power. It was like something ancient was awakening beneath them, something that had been dormant for eons, waiting for the right moment to strike back. The force of it was so overwhelming that even the Zerek soldiers, with their advanced technology and training, could only stand in stunned silence, unable to process what was happening before them. As the tendrils of energy continued to surge upward, the Earth itself began to respond. The cracks in the ground widened, revealing glowing veins of molten rock that pulsed with a strange, otherworldly light. The sky above them darkened even further, the clouds swirling into a vortex that seemed to feed on the energy rising from the planet's surface. Lightning arced down from the sky, striking the ground with terrifying precision, leaving scorching craters in its wake. "We need to retreat," one of the officers shouted, panic in his voice as he realized how out of control the situation had become. "This force, it's too much for us." Vorek ignored the plea. He had seen many things in his long career, but this was beyond anything he had ever faced. The Zeraks were not accustomed to retreat. They were conquerors, not runners. But even he could feel the weight of the power around them. The very planet seemed to be alive with hostility. The Zeraks were not just facing a physical enemy. They were facing something that could not be fought with weapons or force. They were facing Earth itself. "I will not back down," Vorek growled, his voice filled with a dangerous resolve. "We've come this far. We'll take the planet, or we'll die trying." But as he spoke those words, the ground beneath them began to shift. The energy in the air reached a fever pitch, and then, as if the entire planet had made its decision, the first massive shockwave hit. The blast sent the Zerak soldiers sprawling, knocking them off their feet and into the dirt. The shockwave felt like a fist slamming into the heart of the fleet, shattering the remaining cohesion between the warships and their troops. The ground itself seemed to push back against them, as if the Earth itself had decided to throw them off its surface. General Vorik struggled to maintain his footing, his vision blurred by the dust and debris. He had never seen anything like this, never imagined a world could fight back so fiercely. The energy that was pulsing from the planet was not just a force of nature. It was as if the planet was sentient, responding to their presence, pushing them away with a power that was almost alive. "We have to leave," one of his soldiers cried, scrambling to his feet and attempting to regroup. "The planet is rejecting us." But Vorik stood his ground, his eyes locked onto the horizon. He could see the Zarek ships in the distance, many of them still struggling to stay airborne. The fleet, which had once been the pride of the Zarek Empire, was now little more than a chaotic mess of malfunctioning warships. For the first time in his life, Vorik felt doubt. The Zareks had conquered worlds. They had crushed entire civilizations. And yet, this planet, this Earth, had proven to be something entirely different. It wasn't just a planet. It was a living force, a power that had been awakened and now demanded respect. The shockwaves continued, the ground shaking with such intensity that even the mighty Zarek warships were in danger of being thrown from the sky. The air was thick with energy, and the lightning that arced from the swirling clouds above continued to strike the ground, as though the planet itself was lashing out, unwilling to allow the Zareks to continue their invasion. As the Zarek forces began to realize the full extent of the danger they were in, they started to pull back, attempting to regroup. The planet had won this battle, and they could feel the overwhelming power that lay beneath the surface. Earth had not only fought back, it had sent a clear message. This was its world, and no invader would be allowed to conquer it. General Vorik took one last look at the horizon before ordering the retreat. The Zarek fleet, battered and broken, began to pull back into the sky, their ships struggling to escape the planet's relentless force. But as they retreated, they knew this wasn't the end. Earth had shown them its power, and the Zareks were not the kind of empire that would simply accept defeat. They would regroup, they would plan, and they would return. But as they ascended into space, Vorik's mind was racing. Jake's death, the mysterious energy that had awakened with it, it was clear now that Earth was no ordinary world. Something had been triggered, and they had only just begun to understand the true power of this planet. And Earth had only just begun to show them what it could do. The Zarek fleet limped back into the dark expanse of space, their warships severely damaged, some barely able to maintain their flight. The retreat was chaotic, a far cry from the precision and overwhelming force they were known for. General Vorik sat at the helm of the flagship, his face hardened, but his mind was racing. His hands gripped the armrests of his seat tightly, as if trying to steady himself against the whirling storm of thoughts inside his head. What happened? He muttered to himself, staring at the star-streaked view of space beyond the glass. This was not supposed to happen. He had underestimated Earth. That much was clear. In his years of conquest, Vorik had never encountered an enemy like this. The energy he had felt on the surface, the power that seemed to emanate from the very ground itself, was beyond comprehension. It was as though the planet itself had a will, a purpose, and it was actively fighting back against the Zarek invasion. And it was only after their defeat that he realized something far more alarming. Earth had done more than defend itself. It had triggered something that could alter the balance of the entire galaxy. He ran his fingers through his hair, frustration growing. The death of a single human, Jake's death, had awakened this strange, ancient force. That was the only explanation Vorik could find. They had come to Earth with every intention of subjugating it, but instead they had awakened a power that not only defied their understanding, but also seemed to be attuned to humanity itself. This was no ordinary planet. And now, as the fleet limped back toward their home base, Vorik could not shake the feeling that their actions on Earth had set something in motion. The Xerax might have been forced to retreat for now, but Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a focal point of a power they couldn't even begin to understand. It was clear that the galaxy had underestimated humanity and its world. Back on Earth, the situation was no less dire. The energy from the planet's core had not diminished after the Xerac retreat. In fact, it had only grown stronger. It was as though the Earth had now fully awakened, its heartbeat reverberating across the world in subtle waves of energy. Scientists, military personnel, and ordinary people began to feel it. It wasn't just in the air. People could feel it deep in their bones. The world had changed, and no one knew how or why. Sarah stood at the edge of a crater, looking out over the destruction. Her heart was still heavy with grief from the loss of Jake, but she now realized that his death had triggered something much bigger than anyone could have anticipated. The energy she had felt in the air, the strange dreams and visions, it wasn't just her imagination. It was real, and it was undeniable. The Earth trembled beneath her feet again, this time not from the aftershocks of the Xerac fleet's retreat, but from something much deeper, more primal. She felt it in her chest, a kind of resonance with the planet itself, as though the Earth was calling to her. No, not just her. It was calling to all of humanity. Sarah had always felt like there was something about Earth, something ancient and powerful beneath the surface. But now she knew that it was real. And Jake's death, tragic as it was, had been the catalyst for this awakening. Something had been activated deep within the core of the planet, and it was beginning to stir. The Xeracs weren't the first to notice it. They had been too blinded by their own power to understand. But now, it was clear. Earth was more than just a rock floating in space. It was alive with power, and that power was connected to humanity itself. Suddenly, the ground shook once more. It was stronger this time, the Earth itself beginning to crack and split, as if preparing to reveal its true nature. Sarah stumbled, clutching onto a nearby rock to steady herself. She looked around, realizing that she wasn't alone. People had gathered at the edges of the craters, staring at the glowing cracks in the ground, eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. There was no denying it anymore. The Earth was responding, and it was doing so with overwhelming force. "Is it happening again?" one of the onlookers asked, their voice trembling. Sarah didn't have an answer. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew that humanity was at the center of it. The energy they had felt, this cosmic pulse, wasn't just a phenomenon. It was a message. Earth was sending out a signal to the universe, and like the Xeracs before them, humanity would have to reckon with the consequences. Back in the Xerac Command Center, General Vorik sat brooding over a holographic map of the galaxy. His fleet was a mess. Several ships had been destroyed in the skirmish with Earth, and many others had been heavily damaged. They had underestimated the planet, and now even their most advanced technology seemed useless against the forces Earth had awakened. He knew that this wasn't over. He couldn't just walk away and accept defeat. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that Earth wasn't just another planet to conquer. Something about this world was different, something far older, more powerful. He had never felt anything like it, even in the countless civilizations they had obliterated over the centuries. "Prepare a full report," Vorik ordered coldly. "I need to know everything we can about this planet. Earth must be studied, analyzed. There is more here than we understand. We'll return when we're ready." His officers saluted, but even they could sense the uncertainty in his tone. The Xerac Empire, for all its strength, was facing something it couldn't control, something it couldn't predict. Vorik knew he was in uncharted territory now, and the more he thought about it, the more he began to fear that Earth might be more than they could handle. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Sarah and a small group of survivors had begun to piece together what was happening. They had started to make connections, to realize that this was no accident. Jake's death had opened a doorway. An ancient force had been unleashed, and it wasn't going to stop until humanity understood what it meant. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for their very place in the universe. Sarah, One of the survivors called, pulling her from her thoughts. "You need to see this." She hurried over to where they had gathered. The man held a tablet, showing a live feed of multiple locations across the planet. What she saw on the screen made her heart race. Across the globe, from the frozen poles to the dense jungles, similar energy pulses were emanating from the ground, glowing with the same intensity. It wasn't just a localized phenomenon. It was happening everywhere. The planet was changing, and there was no turning back. As Sarah stared at the images, she felt the weight of the realization sink in. This wasn't just Earth fighting back against invaders. It was Earth reaching out to humanity itself. The planet had shown its power to the Xerx. Now, it was showing that same power to the humans who had unknowingly awakened it. And the universe was watching. Whatever was coming next, Sarah knew one thing for certain. Earth's fight for survival had only just begun. And this time, humanity was not going to be the helpless victim. The real battle was just beginning. The universe had always been a place of endless possibility, where powerful empires clashed and ancient civilizations rose and fell. But now, everything was changing. Earth was no longer just a tiny, insignificant speck in the vastness of space. It had become the center of something much larger. A force had awakened deep within its core, and the ripples of that awakening were being felt across the galaxy. As the Xeric fleet retreated, General Vorik's thoughts were consumed with one question. What did Earth's awakening mean? The Xerics had prided themselves on their ability to conquer any world they set their sights on. They had destroyed entire civilizations with ease, reduced mighty empires to ashes. But Earth had proved different. Not only had it fought back with an overwhelming, almost supernatural energy, but it had also left a mark on the universe, a mark that could not be ignored. The general stood in his command center aboard the flagship, staring at a holographic projection of Earth. The image flickered for a moment before stabilizing. His eyes narrowed. Earth wasn't just sending out random energy pulses. There was a pattern to it, a deliberate message. And that message was aimed not at the Xerics, but at the entire galaxy. "General," one of his officers interrupted his thoughts, stepping forward with a data tablet in hand. "We've analyzed the energy waves. They're not just random bursts. They're a form of communication. We're detecting similar energy signatures on distant planets, in far-off star systems." Vorik's heart raced. He had felt it on Earth. The energy that seemed to resonate with every living thing. A force so old, so powerful, it was like the planet itself was speaking to them. Now it seemed, Earth was sending out a beacon to the stars. "Where are these signals coming from?" Vorik asked, his voice low. The officer hesitated for a moment before speaking. "There are traces of this energy in the proximity of several nearby systems. Some are on the edge of known space. Others are in uncharted territories. The patterns are too structured to be natural. It's as if Earth is trying to reach something or someone." Vorik clenched his fists. The realization hit him like a blow to the chest. Earth wasn't just defending itself. It was calling for help. The planet was trying to contact something far beyond the capabilities of the Xeric Empire, something that had been lying dormant for eons. He looked at the officer and spoke with a newfound resolve. "Prepare the fleet. We need to learn everything we can about these signals. We'll follow them. We will uncover the truth of what Earth has awakened." Back on Earth, Sarah stood on a high balcony overlooking the city. The world below was in chaos. Governments were scrambling to react, militaries were on high alert, and the streets were filled with people who had felt the planet's awakening. The strange energy that had once been a quiet hum in the air was now a constant presence, something that could be felt with every step. It was as if Earth had become an entirely different place. But it wasn't just the physical changes that were unsettling. It was the feeling, the sense that something profound was unfolding, something the entire world was being drawn into. It wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. It was a battle for their place in the universe. As Sarah walked through the streets, the air seemed heavier than ever. People were whispering to one another, staring at the sky, as the storm clouds swirled above. Sarah had spent the last few days trying to make sense of it all, trying to understand what was happening to her world and to her. She had been receiving strange visions, dreams that didn't feel like dreams, images of vast, ancient beings, of vast star systems being torn apart by some unimaginable force, and always a deep, resonant voice that seemed to echo in her mind, calling out to her. She didn't understand it, but she knew she had a role to play in whatever was coming. The energy that had been awakened with Jake's death was connected to her, to humanity. They were no longer passive inhabitants of this planet. They were active participants in something far larger than themselves. She reached a small gathering of people who were standing around a large screen. The news was broadcasting a live feed of multiple locations around the world, showing the growing signs of the energy pulses emanating from the Earth's core. It wasn't just Earth, though. The energy was reaching out into space, its signals now visible to anyone with the technology to detect them. "Look at this," one of the people said, pointing at the screen. "The energy waves, they're expanding. It's like the planet is reaching out to something. The whole galaxy could be listening." Sarah's stomach tightened. She had felt this. She knew the energy was connected to the Earth. And now, it seemed, it was connected to the stars. Something was coming, something far bigger than anyone could comprehend. The awakening of the planet had only just begun, and whatever it was calling for, humanity would have to face it head-on. In the distant reaches of the galaxy, in a region of space untouched by the Zerek Empire, another force stirred. It was old, older than the Zereks, older than most known civilizations. This force had watched, had waited. For millennia, it had remained silent, hiding in the vastness of space, waiting for the signal. And now, the signal had come. On a barren moon, deep within an uncharted system, a massive ship, unlike any the Zereks had ever seen, began to power up. Its engines hummed with a low rhythmic pulse, resonating with the same energy that was now surging through Earth. This was no ordinary ship. It was a vessel of ancient design, crafted by a civilization that had long since disappeared. A civilization that had once been the architects of the universe's most powerful technology, and a civilization that had left behind something even more dangerous, an artifact that held the key to the power of creation itself. The ship's sensors locked onto the energy signature coming from Earth. The artifact was awakening, and with it, the knowledge that could either save or destroy the universe. The signal had been received, and the vessel began its journey toward Earth, its engines propelling it forward at unimaginable speeds. The time had come. Earth's awakening was not just a random event. It was the beginning of something far greater. On Earth, Sarah's mind was racing. The visions she had been having, visions of an ancient, forgotten civilization, of an immense power deep beneath the Earth, were becoming clearer by the day. The planet was reaching out, but it wasn't just sending out energy waves. It was calling for something. Someone. The ground beneath her feet trembled again, stronger than before. A new pulse of energy shot upward from the planet's core, sending a shockwave through the city. People screamed as buildings shook and the ground cracked open. Sarah gripped the railing of the balcony, steadying herself as the pulse of energy reverberated through her. "It's here," she thought. The next phase has begun. The sky above her began to darken, and the swirling clouds seemed to coalesce into a single massive vortex. In that moment, Sarah realized that Earth's battle was no longer just against the Zeraks. It was a battle against the very fabric of the universe itself. Whatever ancient power had been lying dormant beneath the planet's surface was now awake, and it had its sights set on something far greater than Earth's survival. The moment the skies above Earth darkened, and the massive vortex of swirling clouds began to churn, the world seemed to hold its breath. The deep, resonating hum that had been present for days now reached a deafening crescendo. It wasn't just the planet vibrating beneath them. It felt as though reality itself was trembling, bending, and warping under the sheer force of what was coming. The people who had gathered in the streets, staring at the phenomenon, were frozen in awe and fear. Sarah stood at the edge of the balcony, her heart racing. The visions had intensified. The dreams, or whatever they were no longer vague flashes of distant memories. They were becoming clearer, sharper, almost real. She could see the ancient beings in her mind, their dark, powerful forms towering over the galaxy, their eyes glowing with an unearthly light. They had been watching for eons, waiting for this moment. And now, Earth had called to them. Earth had awakened a force that no one, neither humanity nor the Xeric Empire, could comprehend. But Sarah felt something else too, something that wasn't just fear or awe. It was a connection. The energy that had been awakened with Jake's death had been linked to her in ways she couldn't fully understand. The planet was calling out to her, no, to them. Humanity was being drawn into this cosmic event, whether they were ready or not. She could feel it in her very bones, a resonance with the Earth itself. The same energy that had driven the Xeracs to retreat was now speaking to humanity, and it was speaking through her. As she stood there, the ground beneath her feet shifted again. This time, it was different. The vibrations weren't just tremors. They felt purposeful, as if the Earth was sending a signal to something beyond its atmosphere. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, trying to focus. What was it trying to tell her? Suddenly, the air crackled with energy. The clouds above the city parted, revealing a tear in the sky. It wasn't a storm or a natural occurrence. It was a rift, a crack in space and time itself. Through it, Sarah could see a massive ship, its silhouette looming like a shadow against the stars. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, its surface gleaming with an alien metallic sheen, yet somehow ancient in design. The ship's enormous size dwarfed anything the Xeracs had brought to Earth, and it pulsed with the same energy that had been radiating from the planet. The ship began to descend, its engines humming in harmony with the resonating frequency that seemed to fill the very air. The people around her screamed in fear, but Sarah could only stare, transfixed. She knew instinctively that the time had come. The universe was changing, and Earth was at the center of it all. Far above Earth, in the vast reaches of space, General Vorak paced nervously in his flagship. The retreat had done little to calm the unsettling feeling that had taken root in him. They had failed. The Xeric Empire, once proud and unstoppable, had been humbled by a planet they had considered insignificant. But the reports from his officers had made it clear. Something more than a mere defense mechanism had been activated. Earth wasn't just fighting to survive. It was reaching out to the stars. And the galaxy had heard. The Xeric fleet, battered and broken, had managed to repair enough of their ships to make a slow, calculated return to their home base. But now, as Vorak watched the massive energy signatures flare up again on his monitors, he realized something far more alarming. The Xeric Empire wasn't the only one watching Earth. The entire galaxy seemed to be drawn toward it. Ships, massive ships, were appearing in the far reaches of space, their sensors locking onto Earth's energy pulses. He knew that some of them were not just exploratory missions, but harbingers of something far worse. The artifact, Vorak whispered to himself. It's coming, the ancient power that the humans have awakened. It's reaching out, and the universe is answering. Back on Earth, Sarah's thoughts raced. The ship that was descending from the rift in the sky wasn't a Xerac vessel. It didn't belong to any known species in the galaxy. It was ancient, its technology beyond anything humanity could fathom. As the ship neared the ground, the energy surrounding it intensified, causing the air to shimmer. The ground beneath her feet vibrated again, this time in waves, as if the Earth itself was sensing with the ship's arrival. Sarah's hands trembled, but she didn't move. It was as though she was rooted to the spot, as if the planet itself had claimed her. And as the ship finally touched down, the atmosphere seemed to change. The energy was overwhelming now, a magnetic force that pulled at her chest, urging her to approach. Without thinking, she stepped forward. The crowd that had gathered around her watched in stunned silence as Sarah moved toward the ship. The air felt heavy, like it was filled with 1,000 unspoken words, a million thoughts not her own. She could hear the whispers, distant and muffled, coming from the ship's direction. And then, without warning, a door on the ship opened with a low hum, revealing a dark, glowing interior. It wasn't just the ship that was pulling her in, it was the planet itself. The Earth was guiding her, urging her to enter. General Vorik sat back in his chair, eyes glued to the screen in front of him. His officers were frantic, trying to make sense of what was happening. Ships from every corner of the galaxy had appeared on the fringes of Earth's system, drawn by the beacon Earth had sent out. Some of them were old enemies of the Xereks, other empires that had long been dormant, now stirring because of Earth's awakening. "They'll come," Vorik muttered, his voice filled with dread. "All of them. The Xerek Empire may have failed, but Earth's signal will bring them here. The ancient races will come for what's theirs." He turned to his officers, his expression hardening. "Prepare for another assault. We will not let Earth claim what it has awakened. But this time, we will not be alone." Back on Earth, Sarah was now standing at the threshold of the ship, her breath shallow as she gazed into its glowing interior. She could feel the pull, the calling from deep within the ship. The moment she stepped inside, she knew, would change everything. It would be a step into the unknown, into a future that no one could predict. And yet she felt no fear. There was something familiar about the ship, as if it had been waiting for her, calling her. The whispers were clearer now, voices not of this world, but of the ancient forgotten beings who had once shaped the universe. The planet had chosen her. It had chosen humanity. They were no longer the weak, insignificant creatures they once were. They were part of something much larger, something that had been waiting for them to awaken. With a deep breath, Sarah stepped into the ship, the door closing behind her with a soft hiss. The ship's interior was vast, its walls lined with strange symbols that pulsed in time with the energy around her. At the center of the room, a glowing orb hovered in midair, its light shifting and changing, as though alive. Sarah moved toward it, feeling an overwhelming sense of purpose. The orb was calling her, urging her to make contact. It wasn't just a message, it was a key. As she reached out to touch the orb, the ground beneath her feet trembled once again. The rift in the sky above began to pulse in rhythm with the ship, and as the first contact was made, a deafening roar filled the air. It wasn't just the Earth that was waking up. The universe itself was changing, and Earth's place in that universe would never be the same again.